1 Eastern time. Are we good to go, or how will we know when you're active or when we're live?
Yeah, you can start 1 minute after. I think is okay.
Okay.
All right, and then the way this works is that I'm going to go first. Is that right?
I'll introduce myself to you and just kind of thank you for being on, and then have you introduce yourself, and then we'll just chit chat for a little bit.
Okay, so you'll ask me questions and stuff, and maybe I'll share my screen. Am I able to share my screen?
I think so. They did on the last one.
Talk about certain works of art.
Yes, you can. You can.
Okay. Yes.
Okay, good. Good.
All right. So we are 1 after the hour. We'll go ahead and get started. Michael, my name is Michelle. It's nice to meet you. Thank you for taking time on your Saturday to talk with us and share a little bit about what you do. How about you tell us a little bit about yourself for everybody that's watching?
Yeah, I'm a sculptor, and I also teach at a university. And as a university professor, that's a pretty typical life. I teach classes and have committees, and also run the Center for New Art at William Patterson University.
Oh, wow.
Which has 3D printers and a robot lab, and all of these things I built and assembled together, right? But at the same time, as a sculptor, I'm active in the world of art. I live in the New York area, and I've exhibited my work all over the United States and Europe, and to some extent in China as well. Also, for that matter, in Turkey too. I've been in 2 exhibitions in Turkey. So I'm the old adage is those who can do, those who can't teach. I'm a little bit of both. I have a foot in both worlds, right? But I really believe that it's important that if you're an artist and you're teaching art, or if you're teaching robotics, or if you're teaching this stuff, that you have a actual real world experience with these things. And so I feel like I can say that I do.
That's really awesome. Yeah, those who can't do teach is normally where it goes. So that's really awesome that you can do both of those things successfully. Some can do a little bit of one, and the other's the only one that's successful. That's really great to be all over the world. That's to be renowned as far as showing your artwork in different states and countries, and being able to be in that life is really exciting. How did you get started in introducing robotics and technology and programming things into art? How did you combine those 2 mediums together?
Well, it's somewhat of an organic. I don't know. It's funny about these words, organic and synthetic. It's both organic and synthetic. The organic part is that I'm a human being and I'm interested in stuff, and I just keep developing and developing. In the early 1990s, I got interested in doing 3D printing, which in those days was really called stereolithography. And I got very excited about it. And I learned how to use a computer-aided design program, also known as CAD. And I learned how to use that. And then I saw that because I could control the design, that the 3D printing and computer-aided manufacture, also known as CAM, which robots fit into very neatly. In fact, they maybe are robots. I saw that if you had an idea and you could describe it or realize it in the CAD space, that you could then also publish it, physicalize it, make it real through 3D printing and through robot carving. What made 3D printing especially intriguing or exciting was that you weren't constrained by things that other media and other techniques you couldn't do. And what I mean by that is that you could print any geometry in 3D printing, whereas previously you weren't able to do that. Whenever you did manufacturing, you had a limitation. It's a technical limitation. I won't go into the details. But now 3D printing allowed you to develop it directly. And it was a realization for me. I mean, I could realize any form that I could imagine. That's basically what it was. It was also the continuation of a very famous statement by a painter named Frank Stella, a very famous New York painter named Frank Stella, who said, "What you see is what you get." what he was talking about is that in my paintings that were very minimalist, what you see is what you get. Don't look for any deeper meaning.
Right.
For me, what you see is what you get meant that if I could see that design on my screen, I could print it physically in real life. And that was a very important detail.
Yeah, that's the 3D printing. Now that it's in homes, it's progressed so much that people just have 3D printers in their homes. We have one in ours, and sometimes it creates what we'd like it to create. Sometimes it shifts a little bit, and you get a one-off, a one-of-a-kind creation. We'll call it an original.
A mess of spaghetti.
A mess, a little bit of a mess of spaghetti. It took a long time to make that tugboat to test the machine for sure. It's really exciting to see that those mix, because once you do have a creation, anything you can make on the screen, you can print either in your home or obviously on a larger scale at a university or with better equipment and more technical equipment. You can print larger things. How do you think that the new kind of AI will play into the 3D printing? So now, what is it? You can give it a description and it will create an image based just generally off a description. Do you think that that will also start to cross into sort of the 3D printing sculpting based off of just AI imagined art?
So far, the AI for objects is pretty bad. It's
limited.
It's not very good. And I would still argue that the AI for images is not very good as well, but it's easier to make things that are kind of compelling and exciting. I think what's really important here, this is what I was referring to a little bit in our previous pre-show conversation, is that there's a lot of mystification around what AI is. It seems to have appeared out of nowhere. If you weren't following AI, then this is like really a kind of a shock, right? So it seems to appear out of nowhere, and it also seems to have unbelievable powers, right? And like it could make any image ever, well, it makes them in a way that's very different and alien to the way we make images, right? Which I think is interesting to explore and all that sort of thing. But the other thing is that it makes things through sampling, and it's really pretty much a cut and paste, and then it makes it fuzzy and a little more refined, a little more refined. The truth is that the most important part, there are two things that are really important. Behind every AI engine is probably a dozen people making it do that thing. So it's not software by itself, by its own little basic self, doing its thing.
Right.
It's been set up, it's been cultivated, it's against a standard. So we're trying to hit that standard, et cetera. So it's important to remember that it isn't the computer and software doing this by itself. The second thing that I think is really important to remember is that there was a prompt, and the prompt was by a human.
Absolutely.
And they always say, in fact, I even read an article that I take exception to it, but they always say things like, well, the prompt was really simple. It was really simple. Well, I've fooled around with AI and done things. I can't get what I want it to do unless I'm really specific about what I want. And so this goes back to the old question, why do you study in a university? You study in a university so you can make great questions. Right?
Good point. Absolutely.
And so this extremely human thing about being able to make a question or to have inquiry, to have curiosity, to have creativity, to have intuition, all these things has not been taken up by artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence is artificial, but isn't intelligent.
Exactly. right. It's working to get there. I was playing around with that. I think it's I won't put the name in there just in case, but the service where you just type something in, tell me a story, and it creates a neat little story. So it's fun to play with now to see where it's at. But it's a good time. I was looking over your work. The is it Pneumatopia? I think it's the most recent one that I was looking at. Yeah, I saw the image. And can you tell me a little bit about that situation?
Sure.
Or about how you created
it
that?
might be useful for me to kind of share my screen so people
Absolutely.
see what I
Yeah.
got going on with Pneumatopia. Let's do the Safari here. And so this is my website for anybody that cares to go look. It's really more like a blog site. So you see, I published an article. So here's the article, and you can click on that. Let's see, I think you can click on it. Can you? I thought you should be able to click on it. Oh, there we go. And then the essay for the third edition, From an Emerging Technology to a Novel Creative Medium, published in the spring. And so you can click the PDF and you can read my article if you like. At the
Okay.
same time, I have all kinds of things. I did a symposium, let's call it, Projects and Platforms Exploring the Culture of NFTs. I did the projects section, and I interviewed these artists. This woman, Michelle Thurs, did the platforms section. She interviewed these artists. It was a very rich conversation. And then this is a book from my Pneumatopia thing. So let's go to
Oh,
check
okay.
out, let's go and check out some projects. Let's go to synthetic cells. Oops, sorry, projects, synthetic cells. There we go. All right, so synthetic cells, or Pneumatopia, was an exhibition of inflated sculptures, all of which had targets on them. So you see this sculpture, very geometric, and then you see that it has a target on it. And then you also see that that target, when you use a tablet computer, it sees that target, and what it does is loads an augmented reality experience, or a virtual experience. In this case, it's loading a pig, and the pig is animated. So it's walking along, doing things. And then in the background is another pig, and it's walking around in a circle. This front pig, you can rotate it, change it, scale it up, scale it down, do whatever you like with it. And then also what people would do is they would pose themselves in the sculpture with the pig, sometimes on their head, sometimes held in their hand, whatever. So it gives these opportunities for a real life experience. So and on one level, these were really beautiful, very modernist, very geometric sculptures. And they represented kind of a little bit of innovation in regards to having this sort of two-chamber structure, so that because without the two-chamber structure, you notice that you can't enter into the side of one of the pieces, because without the two-chamber structure, then the internal one would just collapse. You wouldn't be able to see it at all. So this was sort of a little bit of an innovation. But every time you saw an image in the exhibition, there was an augmented reality experience. In this case, the clown image with it was called Gradient Clown, let loose a bunch of ants that crawled all over the sculpture and all over the clown, etc. And then, so there's a picture of it without the augmented reality. I mean, these are very stunning pieces. And the other thing to keep in mind is they're very large. So this is a 12-foot by 12-foot by 12-foot piece.
Oh, wow.
And at the same time, I'm just going to click a couple of more pictures here. At the same time, you're always having these interactive experiences. This was one of my favorites. You can see that there's a little housefly here, and that housefly would fly up into the air and fly back down again and fly up into the air. And so it played on the idea of a bug in the computer, and it also played on the idea that there has never been a human environment that didn't have a common housefly. So that's kind of fascinating. So I wanted to make sure that the computer environment had a common housefly in it, and so that's why I did that. Here's a rooster. I believe that I also have some videos. Let me see if I can navigate to those really quickly. I think the videos are down here. Oh, the other thing I want to say is that not only did I have an augmented reality exhibition, but I also invited 6 other artists to create augmented reality pieces on top of my pieces. And so
that's exciting.
It was the idea, and I've explored this in a lot of ways, in a lot of means. It's about sculpture and how it might play out within a network or within the network. And so I set up a network kind of environment, or a network situation. So here's an example. Hopefully these won't be too terrible. but here's an example of what the pieces look like in 3D. You can see the augmented reality tablet there. And then here's also, darn it, let's see here, come on, stop. Okay, here's also how the pig looks. You see the pig in the background, you see the pig in the front ground. In a moment, you're going to see me interact with it with my fingers and fingertips and stuff like that. You can move it around, you can make your own composition. You can
I do not see the video of you moving anything right now.
Oh,
everything is just, oh, there it goes. I see it now.
Okay, you know what? I'm going to stop the share for just a second. I'm going to restart the share and I'm going to say everything. All right, here we go. You should be able to see that.
I can see motion now, yes.
Now, can you see it again?
Yes.
Okay, good. So you see, this is a close-up of it, so you guys can get a feeling for it. Again, moving around and orbiting and flipping it every which way, you know, et cetera, flipping it upside down and getting it to work upside down. So you can imagine that this represents a very different way of approaching sculpture than what we typically do. You know, typically a sculptor has an object and he or she will realize that object, and then you just sort of look at it and appreciate it and do whatever. Now, here's I want to show these butterflies. So when you put your augmented reality piece on top of that graphic on the wall, the butterflies come, and then when they push away, it goes away, or they come back again, right? So the you know, you may wonder, what is the idea of this, right? Why did you do this? What, you know, why are there animals and insects? Weren't these sculptures beautiful enough? Why did you have to put images on the side of them? Why, you know, et cetera. And some people have actually come to me and said, why did you ruin those perfectly gorgeous sculptures with these weird images and the augmented reality? Well, the simple answer is because I can. Yeah, and it's exciting and it's fun and it's really, you know, it represents a new way to access knowledge. But the more complex answer has to do with how we use objects in culture to store memory, knowledge, experience, time, history, etc. Right? And you know, objects have been fantastic memory accumulators and communicators. You know, for example, you have, you know, maybe your grandfather carved a knife, and the knife has a little, you know, you remember those carved knives that people do?
Oh,
those beads on the inside, and you just love it because you know your grandfather spent time on it. You know he loved it, and this was part of him relaxing, but it was also part of him challenging himself, and it was also typical of him that he would do something like this, you know, and all those things in that knife represent your grandfather. And so you have a warm feeling every time you see it, even no matter how many times you see it, right?
Yeah.
We often call that the aura of objects, that each object has a kind of a, I don't want to say a mystical, but an energetic kind of aura that allows people to experience its meaning, its thing, psychological states, etc. We know this in the arts really extremely well. And everybody on one level or another participates in this and participates in the aura of objects. The question, of course, is whether there is an aura in computing. There's a famous article written about that. I don't want to get into all that stuff right now. That's not our import. Is intellectual complication is not our import today. But the point is that this augmentation, this augmented reality, allows us to automatically access the object as experience. And that's a fascinating place for any object to be. Now, as the audience probably knows, and probably you know as well, augmented reality could be used for all kinds of commercial purposes, reasons, types, stripes, etc. I'm sort of more interested in this experiential thing and the abstraction and strangeness of that experience, that all of a sudden we're living in a physical world and physical bodies and having augmented virtual experiences simultaneously. You know, there's some debate whether this represents something new or whether the invention of the object itself was already an augmentation of sorts. and that augmentation is part of the human imagination, the human mind. But what's brilliant about augmented reality is that if I program this stuff, then you can experience this for yourself. And
Yeah.
as I invited all these other artists in to program their augments on my projects, that meant that there wasn't a final monumental experience. There were many experiences that could be made on top. So this became like channels on a TV set that I could watch sports, I could watch movies, I could watch whatever. And that's sort of what's happened in my show. One artist did a very graphic thing with an animation. Another artist did another sculptural project with a thing. A third artist made a piece that transported you to China and 3D,
Oh, wow.
3D modeling sites in China, 3D modeled sites in China. A third artist made a figure that whispered in your ear the entire time. So
oh, wow.
these were all these different channels that you could access through the platform of my work. So even though the piece, the sculpture, the project, the exhibition looks pretty simple on one level, I mean, you see the object, you see the image, you see the augmentation, you can see that it starts to behave in really a very fluid, very complex, and very high concept kind of way very quickly. And that's what fascinates me about the use of augmented reality for sculpture. And
absolutely.
Stuff.
I did think whenever you mentioned it, whenever the first one you showed reminded me, or my first thought was of just inclusivity in art. Because if you have, youth, everyone has different things they're interested in, different things that hold their attention and create their memories. When you have youth coming up, right, teens or younger children, trying to engage them in art and deeper thought and what's associated with it, if you have that in your show with the augmented reality that happens, they're not just looking at an amazing sculpture, which would draw their attention anyways. It's very fun, very colorful. I believe it could keep attention, but then you've introduced the technology aspect of it. So now they're looking at interactive things, or they're going to China, or they're seeing butterflies. And so just creating that inclusivity of others within one location, within your show, you have so many different avenues through one piece to access people. And that's really exciting. That's a very neat way to include augmented reality into art. I really appreciated that.
I have a kind of a funny experience that I was down there just hanging out in the show, and there was a mother and her two children, and they were going around from piece to piece to piece, exploring things. And I was afraid that they might have missed something, right? So I went over to them and I said, I let them experience the show and stuff. But then I went over to them and I said, well, excuse me, but, you might have missed this thing. And all three of them looked at me with this shock on their face, like, excuse me, but we're busy over here having an experience.
We're having a great time right now.
Yeah, and I had totally interrupted, and I loved that experience. The fact that there was no final authoritative view of what you were seeing, or that it was happening in the viewer's mind. It wasn't just happening in the physical space. So
yeah, that's really exciting.
Stuff. Yeah,
it definitely is. What is your most recent project? Is the Pneumatopia the most recent project that you've been working on, or do you have something?
I'm always working on stuff, and so if I could, my room's a mess, but if I could flip around and show you my room, which I won't do because it's such a mess. I have 5 3D printers at my house. I have 4 of them in the study and 1 of them in the living room. And, this is a little bit the inheritance of COVID times and all that sort of stuff. And but, I'm always 3D printing. I'm always designing. I'm always learning new details of the software and, different kinds of things. And I'm always just pushing the envelope as much as I can, always trying to graft experience to physical objects, and then also develop that, as I mentioned, this platform of the object to the image to the interactive. I'm very committed to that now. I've been doing it since about 2011 or so, and I can see myself continuing to do that for a while. there's lots of projects that I'm in discussion about with people. They haven't quite come to fruition yet, but I'm working on it, you know?
Yeah,
COVID really put a damper in a lot of things.
it did. It did. It had a long lasting impact, and it's almost like someone hit the pause button, but not everything stopped.
Yeah.
Only a
Right.
few things. Only
Yeah.
a few things stopped. So that's understandable. Are there different sorts of maybe software or programming that you would suggest if someone was interested in maybe getting involved in creating art with robotic programming or any
Yeah.
augmentation? Are there certain platforms or softwares or programs that you suggest that they just look into?
Sure, absolutely. Well, on the one thing to keep in mind is, first of all, what do you want to do, right? I believe that, like, I wanted to mention a book. Sorry about that.
That's okay.
I wanted to mention a book, and the book is Meta Skills, 5 Skills for the Robotic Age. And it's written by a guy named, hold on one second, I'll tell you his name. Where did his name go? Meta Skills, Marty Neumeier. And Neumeier, Neumeier. And it talks a little bit, I find it to be a very delicious book. And no surprise, because he spends most of the book talking about Leonardo da Vinci, right? And so it's fascinating that this researcher who was all about, like, how are we going to deal with robots? How are we going to deal with artificial intelligence? How are we going to deal with all this stuff? He goes back to the maestro. And the maestro, of course, was somebody who had tremendous curiosity about the world. And then at the same time had tremendous curiosity about, and had his tools in order and would make things all the time based on his theories of the world and different kinds of things. So Mr. Neumeier puts together 5 different concepts. One of them is creativity. One of them is intuition. One of them is, you know, I strongly recommend you all look this up and you try to apply it to your own life. You know, what's funny is that in academia, what we do is we teach people how to fit into a specific discipline, right? So if I'm studying marketing, I learn all about what it is to market. I learn all the best practices and all those sorts of things. If I'm doing physics, I learn all about what the rules of physics are. I learn what problems have been created. I learn but I never taught to create problems myself. In fact, if I veer from those problems, I'm outside of physics, right? But indeed, the way physics gets forward is people at high levels come up with new problems, et cetera. Well, that's fascinating, because in the art departments, what we do every day is create problems, right? Now, many people might giggle. You sure do. You sure do make a lot of problems. So the point is that we can teach you some specific things about how to do this and how to do that. But we all know that when it comes down to it, there's no rule for making art. What makes a great piece of art, what makes a historic piece of art, or what makes a there's no rules. In fact, breaking the rules is almost always the way that people move forward. And so, having said that, I just want to really frame that the arts are one of the few places in academic culture where the creation of knowledge and through problems and problem solving and the evaluation through the critical method are primary to that curriculum. So this is a little a bump to say, study arts or let your kids study arts. Anyway,
right.
The other thing that I'll say, let me get back into your question a little bit further. You know, creativity, imagination, problem solving, these are things that robots can't do. AI can't do, right? We do them. So these are really strong things. But so what can I do? Let's say I want to pursue doing things with digital media, 3D printing. I want to do stuff on Instagram that has to do with these gorgeous little twists and turns. The number one thing is you want to decide what you want to do, right? And desire to do something is usually the best teacher, right? I want to invent a project. I want to invent a product. That would be one thing. Well, in that case, if you want to invent a product, probably your best bet is to use a program like Fusion 360, which is available from
Okay.
Autodesk. If you're a student, or if you have academic credentials, or if your children are students or whatever, they can typically get that program for free. All right. There are other programs, like let's say you're really rudimentary. There's one called Tinkercad, right? For example, and that can build a basic sort of CAD-like experiences. But now let's say, for example, you don't want to make super engineered, highly sophisticated products, but rather what you'd like to do is explore the artistic side, expression, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Well, then instead of using CAD, you're going to use animation programs. And there's no end to animation programs out there. There's one that's free, that is as good as any of them. It's called Blender, B-L-E-N-D-E-R.
Oh, okay.
And you can use that, or at the same time, you can, many of those programs, Autodesk owns two of them, that's Maya and Autodesk is a big player in the 3D space, but that's it's Maya and 3D Studio Max. But then there are other ones, like for example, I'm an adept at what's called Cinema 4D, and I really love it, and I've used it forever. It's very easy to learn. It's not complicated. If people that have learned how to use Maya come to my classroom and they're learning Cinema 4D, they're like, oh my God, this is so much easier than Maya. I can't believe it. And then there's some programs that are kind of in between. Like there's a program called Rhino 3D, which is a very exciting, kind of flexible, fluent program. And, you know, a lot of architects and designers use it, and a lot of artists use it as well. So those are a group of programs. Now, you notice that I talked about programs that you could make designs in first. And the reason I did that is because you can't 3D print something unless you have a file. And you can't have a file unless you've designed it. Now, there are, of course, places where you can go on the internet and download free files for printing.
Right.
And, you know, like Thingiverse is one, Instructables has another one. I mean, there's a bunch of them, really a heck of a lot of them. Turbo Squid has some for sale, some for free, blah, blah, blah. But the point is that you're doing what somebody else has designed. You're just simply printing something. So I would recommend that if you're going to get into this world, you learn how to do the design techniques that these programs represent. If you're more mechanical and product oriented, more of an engineering kind of brain, then you want to go with Fusion 360, maybe Rhino 3D, maybe SolidWorks, maybe, you know, Pro-E. Those are programs. And if you're more on the creative side, or you're going to do design, you know, sort of maybe you're on the high style side of design, then you're going to use Cinema 4D, and you're going to use Blender 3D, and you're going to use, you know, etc. Now, what's kind of amazing about all these programs is that they all, like the animation programs, not only could you design products and sculptures and art things, but you could do animations. You can do product development. You can do renderings of architectural buildings. So these programs are so powerful. They're kind of extraordinary. They just are amazing. And at the same time, let's say, for example, you're a ceramic artist and you love to make things out of clay, and the idea of using computers makes you sick to your stomach, but you want to realize something really large scale, and you find out that computers are the best way to do it. Well, then you can get into what's called 3D scanning, which is essentially like making a three-dimensional photograph. And once you've made that 3D photograph, then you can clean it up and maybe add some features to it, do some stuff that the CAD programs afford you, and then 3D print it or CNC carve it at large scale, you know? So this is an amazing, powerful, extraordinary time to be alive and to have these tools at our disposal. Like, it's mind-boggling.
Absolutely. The high school actually here in our town, my niece is doing 3D animation with one of the technology schools. I have a partnership with the high school. And so she's doing 3D animation now. And some of the I've heard some of the softwares that you mentioned. She's talked about it. She's like, look at my lightsaber, look at this trunk that I made, and all of just these really neat things that she's animating. And it's so interesting to see teenagers or early 20s college students, right? Whenever I was a teenager and in college, we had MS-DOS and floppy disks, and we weren't animating anything in school. But now to see just how far technology's come, it's a fantastic time to be, if you can have some independent thought, a little bit of independent creativity, and just the desire to make something interesting or new. The technology is there. It's prime time for us to get in there and do those things.
You know, I think that probably the people on the call are doing two things. This is my understanding. You may correct me. One is that they're thinking about their own lives, and they're thinking about retooling in their own environment. And how do you deal with all the change that's afoot? And then the other thing is that many of these people have children, and they're worried for their children. And how can children be prepared for the future, et cetera? You know, so in both cases, learn Chinese, but also learn learn about web programming. Right? Because everything will come to you through web programming. I mean, you know, that is the language of our culture. How that is manipulated, what happens there, how things are programmed, that is the language of the future. And then at the same time, you know, start to build capabilities in these other areas, because every one of these programs I mentioned has a scripting computer language on top of it, so that you can alter it to your own purposes. If you wanted to create something else, or you wanted to do something the program didn't do. The other thing that I think is significant when you're thinking about your children and thinking about training them, etc. I have a good friend, and he told me this story. It's a long, let's see, how can I shorthand this story a little bit? My friend's an artist, and he was bemoaning the fact that his son didn't like to draw. And so we were talking about it, and he said, well, we were drawing the other day, and my son said, stick figures, they're genius. And my friend, the artist, said, stick figures, that's stupid. Well, the thing is that the father didn't meet the son where the son lived, right? The father was like, no, you see, there's this whole other world. Stick figures are just stupid in the beginning. Like, so what I said to the father, you know, because I'm an educator, et cetera, so I said, just draw some stick figures with him. Just start where the kid is at, the stick figures. And now that same son really wants to do hydro dipping, because that's all the rage. You see it all over YouTube. It's magic and all that sort of stuff. Right. But his dad is like, I'm not going to let you do that commercial, you know, because they want to dip Supreme labels or something like that. I'm not going to let you do that. And also, it's toxic. So I went on the internet. I found some non-toxic hydro dipping. And then I found some non-commercial, you know, designs, and said, you know, that's where he lives. So let him live there and support him in his interest in that place, rather than say, you can't do hydro dipping, you got to do computer programming, or you got to do this, you got to do that. Because all roads lead to Rome, and Rome is the place where you live your life. You know, all roads. Yeah.
Absolutely. I agree. Allowing and just having the thought that art is art, and your passions are your passions, and no two people are the same. You have 5 people in a room, and none of them are the same in any ways. They might have similar interests, but just try to remember your own passions and where you came from, and when you were passionate about either art or sculpting, and that passion just lies somewhere else with some people, and let them do their things.
Let your children have their own passion, and just support it wholeheartedly. Just tell them how much you love what they're doing, and get educated about what it is they're doing, so that you can help them, you know.
Absolutely. And it's interesting to see how those skills develop in other people, whether it be other adults or children. There are things that I'm like, I love to listen to you, but I could never do it, or you try, and it's just not a skill that you have, and that's their passion, and they pick it up, and they're fantastic at it. And we need everyone to do everything, right? So be good at what you're good at, because somebody's going to need you there at some point. I've really enjoyed talking with you today. It's been very eye-opening about what's going on, and I never really thought about the crossover between augmented reality or coding and robotics within art itself. I mean, you see things and you think, how did they do that? Probably involved some sort of machinery or design building, but I never really connected the two together and got to see exactly how that worked, collaboration wise, and all the different tools and mediums that are used to make that happen. So it's been really, really eye-opening. So I appreciate you sharing that information with me. And I know it kind of sounded like a final thought a moment ago where you said, meet your children where they are, allow people to do what they do and celebrate them for that. With the majority of the people watching will probably be working with software or coding, or different types of robotics. Are there any maybe final thoughts or recommendations that you have for individuals that are working with those that may not necessarily be driven to create art with it? However, it's a different form, right? It's a technical art versus a visual creation.
Creativity is a human potential, right? That it's not an artistic. It doesn't just belong to artists or creative types, so to speak. People solve problems all day long, and the solution of those problems is a creative act. And so, but being interested in other things, like, for example, many of my friends who are programmers are musicians. And I think there's a real interesting link between programming and music and how that thing sort of works. So I would just say, I don't have any advice because I'm in the same boat as everybody else. I'd like more money and more credit, right? More respect, more money, more credit. Don't know if it's coming any day soon. But at the same time, I mean, I think I would just say, you could believe the news and believe that we're in a dire strait, or you could push forward with your own, your family, yourself, your friends, and you could create positive, connective environments where you're supporting each other and creating a new world, because we're in the throes of a huge culture shift. So, and it's up to us how it's going to turn out. It's up to us.
Yeah, I agree. That's great advice. That's a great way to think about it. And we often use the term creative to describe art, music, people that are in creation, but as you mentioned, technology, problem solving, building, interacting, conflict resolution, all of these involve some form of creativity. So to be able to really focus in that doesn't belong to just one subset, that it's used daily for everyone is great advice. I appreciate that. And or embrace the shift. Right?
Yeah, embrace the
just
shift.
Keep pushing forward. Yeah,
life has changed.
I agree. Well, I appreciate your time today, and thank you so much. It was very nice to meet you.
So nice to meet
good luck
you.
on your endeavors, and I hope that you print something awesome here soon.
Every damn day.
Right. Thank you, Michael.
Be well. Take care now. Good luck to everybody.
Bye-bye.